Hey guys, what is up? It is me, Pagey, here once again with another video on Superman and Lois Season 4, just the show as a whole. It's not my last ever video with Superman and Lois. We've got some other stuff to do after this review for the finale, but if my voice sounds a bit weird, I think I've contained myself a bit. I gave myself a couple of minutes. I was going to do it raw. I was going to do this review raw, but I was like all sniffly and stuff because, man, I don't think I've ever cried that hard at the end of a series. I think the only one that I think I ever legitimately bawled. I'm not bawled. I think this is the hardest I've ever cried at the end of a show because of how it ended. Not because of how, just because the show was ending, but how it ends and how well it ends. But the only other show where I think I can compare it, though this was worse, if you want to call it that, was probably The Office, which is such a weird one, but because and that wasn't even the finale. That was just like a specific moment farewelling a character. But man, of course, we're going to be talking about all the spoilers from this finale, and of course, there's a lot because a lot happens, in the first half, but then also the back half, where they really just gut punch you with emotions in good and, I don't want to say traumatic ways, but definitely like very sad ways. But we got so much to talk about. But of course, throughout the video, let me know in the comment section down below your thoughts on this finale. Was it satisfying? Do you leave the show with no qualms, no issues, no regrets? Do you think they nailed it? Because I can't believe, I think, to be honest, the final 10 minutes, I can't think they could have done it any better. Actually getting a bit emotional thinking about it again, but yeah, I think they wrapped up this season incredibly well, and I think the show as a whole, and I think they made everyone have a pretty fit ending, if you want to put it. But of course, last episode, just to set up, because episode 9 and 10, the two last episodes, do really work as almost like a part 1 and part 2, very similar to episode 1 and 2 of this season as well. But the main things to really think of is Lex now having the upgraded suit, so now he can legitimately do damage himself, and Doomsday has returned. So that's going to be a big issue heading into this episode. But yeah, overall, this episode, I think some people might have in regards to the quickness of it, but if you're used to series finales, a lot of the time they'll not do a rush job, but a lot of the action stuff will really be in that first third to half. And this does the exact same thing. So I wasn't too shocked that everything was happening in that first, well, really, I guess about 20 minutes, 22 minutes or something if you're not watching with ads. So nothing really surprised me there, but I can't believe when they were starting to do all the end stuff and they were jumping forward through time, I was like, oh god, they're really pulling at the heartstrings now. But let's just get into the actual breakdown because there's quite a lot to talk about. So we do start with Lana and John, and I was really curious about those two characters coming in because I was like, are they really going to do anything overly satisfying with those characters? And they do come the end of the episode, but we start with them, funnily enough, or ironically, considering what happens, they're addressing their relationship and how it's probably not going to work. But before they can really end their relationship and cut it off, this is when Doomsday returns. So we're essentially it's after pretty much picking up the end of last episode when Doomsday picks up Superman, but from their angle, if that makes sense. But the Doomsday fight continues. The Superboys do help out, but Superman tells them to help the citizens of Smallville. And this is once again Clark pushing off the boys, not wanting them to get into danger, not really wanting them to take that responsibility as of yet, and that he is big enough to do it, though we know, and I think deep down he knows that as well, that that's just not the case. And Superman's about to be killed again. He's legitimately about to be killed again, and the boys run one of the plays they've been practicing. I think they called it Fraternal, obviously because, well, yeah, so all that stuff. So they run that play to do, I guess, distract Doomsday and take him away for Superman for the time being. And Superman is not happy when he comes to, because he's like, well, I wanted to protect them. And this is when Lois is like, you can't just keep them protected. They've got these powers. You're getting weaker and weaker. They're going to eventually have to step up to this situation, step up to the plate. And Superman does come around and go, okay, well, let's figure it out from here. But we do see the boys leading Doomsday around the country, and during this, we learn that John Henry has this prototype that sticks to metal. And at first, I was like, what's going on here? Because the boys lead Doomsday back to Smallville, and then the kinetic hammer comes through, and it crushes Doomsday's head, killing him. And I thought that maybe the prototype was stuck to the hammer, but we learned that's not the case. So it was just a really well-timed throw by John Henry. I think it was John Henry that threw it. I assume it was, or was it Superman? I'm not too sure. But anyway, it crushes Doomsday's... Oh no, it wasn't Superman, because Superman avoided the punch. So John Henry throws it really well aimed, and it crushes Doomsday's skull, bashes his brain in, killing him, for the time being, of course, because as we know, Doomsday is going to come back alive. And Superman does rush to get Doomsday to the sun to finish him off. But meanwhile, all this is going on, they know that Amanda McCoy is someone that they're going to have to get to, but she's almost taken out by Lex. Lex is trying to, like, once again, very similar to what we saw with Cheryl Kimball previously this season. He's trying to cut off all the loose ends. He knows Amanda's not as loyal to him as she was earlier in the season, so he's trying to take her out, and she's saved literally in the last split second by the Superboys, and they bring her back, and Amanda's going to help take down Lex, well, because he's pretty much just tried to kill her. Now, the first, like, I think really emotional, I want to say really emotional, but like the one that pulled a bit on your heartstring was when Superman pushes Doomsday into the sun, and you see his eyes light up like Bizarro Doomsday, and you can see, you get like the flashbacks of his life before he's about to be destroyed. And you, like, I think most of us has understood this, that he's not a pure villain. He's a guy that's been corrupted and everything like that. There's still Bizarro Doom, or just Bizarro, I guess you could say, Bizarro Superman deep down within there, but it's just a corrupted mind and a corrupted being and stuff like that. But that was a really, like, I guess like a sad moment, just because we'd spent a lot of time with that character in season 2. So we see him burn up into ashes. He's dead, can't come back, and at the same time, the sun does heal Superman, which is obviously a plus, heading back into back onto Earth to take on Lex. But speaking of Lex, he does arrive in Smallville, and it just swats away Jonathan essentially, but attacks Jordan, and Lois does step up and baits Lex so she can attach the prototype, which just sort of explodes and stuff like that. Doesn't necessarily do too much, but it's a way of like pushing back Lex back, and making him feel a bit inadequate at that point in time. Now, one of the cooler moments is when Jonathan goes to Jordan goes to Jonathan. Jonathan's like not breathing. He can't really. He thinks he's dead. Essentially, he's going to die. And Jordan essentially like super defibrillates Jonathan back to life, which I thought was cool. It's almost like a shockwave. Like, yeah, it was like creating like all this kinetic energy and stuff, which I thought was pretty cool. But we do get the Superman versus Lex fight, which is pretty cool up in the clouds where there's blue lightning going on. We see one of the new kryptonite weapons, which is like these kryptonite infused screws. So they fly in, and I thought they were just like bolts that just like stabbed into him. But then you can see like Superman look down, and you can see like they're slowly screwing in. And because they're screwing in, it's harder for him to pull them out, which I thought was really gnarly. And I was like, God, that must be painful. But at this point, Superman has had enough. He's had way too much of this bullcrap from Lex, and we get this really cool, like, built-up sonic punch, essentially, which just destroys Lex's suit to bits, which I thought was really, really cool. But this is a really surprising thing, because that's the last point that we spend, really, once they get back and, like, Lex is captured and everything like that. That's the last point we spend in the present day, if you want to put it where the show's been set for most of this season, because we jump ahead in time 1 year. I thought it was like, at first, I was like, okay, maybe we might, go ahead like a week or something like that at first. We jump ahead straight a year, and we're actually at Lana and John Henry's wedding. We get Clark walking Lana down the aisle, which I thought was fairly fitting. We also have Lois leading the ceremony, so Clark and Lois play a bit in there. But this also is pretty special with Lois leading the ceremony, because John Henry gets his happy ending. When we first met the character, he was dealing with a lot of emotional turmoil due to what happened on his Earth. Being around Lois, of course, which is the doppelganger of his wife. And I thought it was fitting that he finds his happy ending with Lana, but also Lois leads the ceremony, which I thought was really, really fitting and really, really nice. And Sarah does return briefly, and we do get a scene with her and Jordan just sort of pondering on their futures and where things are going, which I thought was, like, Sarah really plays like a really minor role in this episode compared to like, the rest of the characters. So, which I'm not too surprised, because she was in like a decent amount earlier in the season, and I don't know really how you could have done much more with her coming into this season. Like, I think this episode specifically for the guest characters was really more about John Henry and Lana, just because of like wrapping up their story. But in regards to like pondering on their futures, the same happens with John and Nat, and they finally feel like they have found their home. And I didn't really know specifically at that time if they were talking about Smallville or they were just talking about this Earth in general, but based off like a flash forward later, it appears that it's about Smallville specifically, which I thought was good. But that's not the last thing when they're talking about future, because we get Clark and Lois talking about their future and their legacy, and Lois learns that Lex gets a life sentence at this point, so that puts a lot of baggage on the side, which is like, doesn't have to think about Lex getting out again. But I thought this was really interesting about, obviously they have their own personal lives, but on the outside, it's just like, how is Superman and Lois Lane going to be remembered? And I thought that really well set up the ending portion of this episode, which we'll talk about in a second. But one thing I thought was really fitting and a bit of like a just desserts was Lex arriving in prison. He just thinks he's going to go back into Stryker's Island or Stryker's prison and, just take control like he did last time. But of course, he doesn't have the same control as he did last time, does he? Both on the outside and the inside. So when he arrives in prison, no luxuries like last time. He doesn't have like the warden under his thumb like he did. But you know who is in control? Bruno Mannheim, which I thought was really fitting considering how last season ended, but also because Bruno helped this season. So I thought, hey, he deserves a bit of a reward for doing that, doesn't he? But the bit which, as soon as it started, I'm like, I'm going to cry here. I am 100% going to cry. And we get a Superman monologue start, incredibly similar to not only how parts of this season started, like after he came back to life after being killed by Doomsday, but also the pilot episode all the way back, episode 1 of season 1. So we get the Superman monologue and he talks about being able to live for another 32 years after Sam Lane gave his heart to him, sacrificed himself so Superman could get his heart. Of course, I guess technically this is 31 after the point where we were last on the show because we jumped already 1 year ahead, but it gives us a time frame in regards to like where we end up, I guess. But he does talk about his legacy, and we do see the Superboys get their suits, which were the same ones as those concept art for the most part, which I thought was really cool. And John and Nat also get new suits. They John looks like Steel from the comics. He has the red cape, has the S, everything like that. So he gets a really cool updated suit. It makes you wish we'd seen more of that, but I can understand why. And it's just cool that we get to know that that happens going into the future, that he gets that proper suit, and also Nat gets her suit back. They build another one. But it's really when we jump further into the future, we get a flash forward, and we do like multiple flash forward scenes, but we do see older Clark and Lois. Lois, like they've both got like a bit of an old person thing going on with the style and everything. But we also see an older Jordan and Jonathan, which is something that I did want to see. I was like, okay. And they first walked in, and I was like, oh, they just got the same actors to play the older versions, and then they transform. They like merge or like morph in. I don't want to say like morph as if like they, in that moment, they transform, but like it fades into their older versions. And I don't know who was playing Jordan. I'm not too sure who the actor playing Jordan was. He looks familiar, so I feel like I've seen him in something before. But Jonathan was played by David Gwintoli, who is Bitsy Tulloch, aka Lois Lane's husband in real life. He directed an episode earlier this season, so I thought that was really cool that there was a bit more of a personal touch there. So he played the older version of Jonathan. We also saw an older version of Sarah, an older version of Candace. I don't know if we saw an older version of Nat, because we didn't see like an older version of Chrissy, of John, or of Lana. We did see an older version of Kyle, which we'll touch upon in a second, but I don't think we saw an older version of Nat from memory. But along with that, they also have lots of grandkids. So Superman and Lois have lots of grandkids running around, which I thought was nice. But the first real set, this is where I really started tearing up, was when we learned that Lois actually has cancer return. She ends up dying of cancer the second time around, just because it's an older age and stuff like that. And it's when they're much older as well. It's even past that point where you officially jump into the flash forward. So it's not like she died too soon, if you want to put it. But it was really interesting that Lois's final words were daddy, as if talking to her father Sam Lane and stuff like that, which I thought was extra sad as well. But we also see that Clark does get a dog called Crypto to fill in the void once Lois is gone, because he's in this home by himself. Like Jordan and Jonathan come around all the time and stuff like that, but he's still in that house by himself day to day and stuff. So he does get a dog called Crypto to keep him company, a golden retriever, as you'd expect, or a Labrador, depending which way you want to go, but essentially they sort of look for the most part the same. So I thought that was nice. And yeah. Now, I was worried because we have Clark having a heart attack on the street, and they do say it's like very close to where his father had the heart attack, but luckily because Kyle is there, he doesn't die at that moment in time, so he gets to live a bit longer, and this leads to him actually dying peacefully with Jordan and Jonathan by his side, which I thought was a much better way to go. And it was sort of like interesting to hear him describe it. Like when he died, it was almost like a euphoric feeling that when he passed over, and we do get this like bit of like him entering like almost like an afterlife, I guess. Like that's the best way I can describe it. It's like almost like an afterlife where we get like a really good scene or a good moment where Clark forgives Lex, where you see Lex crying and everything like that. And it's also like, I think they're trying to make him look a bit older from what it looked like, but it was hard to tell exactly. But because Lex is bald, so you couldn't see if there was any grey hair or anything like that. But I thought that was actually a really nice moment with Clark doing that. And then also saying goodbye, I guess, but reuniting with his loved ones at the same time, which ends with him seeing Lois in the red dress, like that, big red dress from like the date that we had in that was brought up in like season 1, I think it was. So yeah, that was like a really nice moment overall, that final part of the episode. But pretty much during that whole final monologue thing, like it was just building up, building up, building up to me. Just like, you know, I'm not too ashamed or too shy to say I'm a big crier. I'll cry in movies and stuff like that, especially if like that's the intention. And they definitely intended, like they would have got people to tear up that don't normally, if not ever, I think, cry at shows or movies or whatever it is. So they definitely did an amazing job, and you have to do a really good job to achieve that. So you have to, like, kudos are deserved for not only the episode, the season, and the show as a whole, but specifically that last thing. I can't think of how they could have ended the show in a more perfect way. I'm actually stunned of how well they did that. But overall, I'm going to talk more about like the ending and stuff. I'm going to do a video talking about the ending and diving into deeper details about that, and some interviews and stuff with the showrunners have already come out, which I've bookmarked. So we'll talk about that in another video. But overall, I'm incredibly satisfied with not only the finale, but just this whole final season as a whole. There was always trepidations going into it because shortened season, budget cuts, and just not, and the show ending when it wasn't meant to. Like, we know it was like, it wasn't meant to be a 4-season show. It was meant to be like a 6-7 season show. So they had to compress a lot of stuff and also rush a lot of stuff. They've admitted that. So for them to deliver a not only finale, but a final season as a whole in such a well done manner, it's one hell of an achievement. And it's definitely I think the finale that hit me the most. I think the Flash's final, very similar. The final like 5 to 10 minutes was very emotional as well. And I think they did a really good job finishing that off. But I think as a whole, with the whole finale and also the final season, I think Superman Lois takes the cake. I mean, I can't believe how well they did it. But yeah, guys, thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, it'd be awesome if you could drop a like and show support. Let me know in the comment section down below your thoughts on this finale. Did it live up to your wildest fantasies? Were you satisfied? Did you cry? Be honest. Did you cry? And yeah, let me know down there. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. Keep your eyes out for the next couple of days with some bonus videos regarding this finale and this final season as a whole that's going to come out. Yeah, until next video, guys, I'll catch you later. Goodbye.